I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, April the 14th, brought to you in part by Macrocin by Bimeda. Fast acting, small doses, easy to use, short withdrawal, and made in North America. That explains Macrocin by Bimeda. It's the effective tulathromycin injection with an affordable upfront cost. For more information, go to macrocin.com. Also, Joplin Regional Stockyards in Carthage, Missouri. They've got a moderate run here today on Monday for the regular feeder cattle auction, expecting 8,000 head. They will be starting at 6 a.m. Market should be pretty good. We had kind of a positive on our fat cattle, if you want to call it that. The highest prices that we saw were some of the latest prices that we saw, and of course most all your markets came back from the early week losses last week, so we're looking to carry on forward. Joplin is reminding you that the weaning date for the June 19th value-added sale, if you want to get your cattle into that value-added sale, you got to get your cattle weaned next week. Now, how many auctions give you an upfront reminder of that so that you can have your cattle eligible for those sales? That's Joplin Regional Stockyards. For more information about the value-added sales, go to joplinstockyards.com, and of course you can watch all their sales at DVAuction.com. Overreaction, that's what we saw to President Trump's tariffs. Of course, the tariff deal was a big deal. I mean, we talked about it in length last week. It's just like a root canal. We knew we had to get it. We weren't looking forward to it. We knew it was going to suck when we first announced it, but we knew it would be better for the long run, and all of those things have been true. Of course, you know, a lot of the liberals and the Democrats said that, you know, the sky is falling and the world's coming to an end, and Trump, he cost us all the ground we'd made up on the 401ks and all that stuff. The stock market was higher, ended the week higher last week than it started. So I think you can erase all that. Most of your commodity markets, your ag commodity markets, were higher also. And we saw most everything turn back around. Of course, you know, it's going to be tough with China. And China buys a lot of things that they send a lot of things over here. They make a lot of things with that sweatshop labor and things that we buy, and we can buy it relatively cheap. That's probably going to go away for a while at least. There's other places that make that stuff. But China now has a 145% tariff on the goods that they send over. Of course, they've got it jacked up pretty much that high on all of our stuff, but they weren't selling any of our products anyway. So they got a lot of people over there. They've been taking advantage of us for a long time, stealing all of our intellectual properties that we spend a lot of time in research and development and a lot of money, you know, inventing things and making things easier and doing stuff. They steal that, go over there and produce it a whole lot cheaper than we can produce it, because we pay our people better and we care about our people, and we don't slave our people in a communist type country like they do over there. And then they manipulate the currency on top of that. So, you know, we don't want to be trading with them anymore anyway, unless they want to get upright with us. Well, they have not come to the table yet, but supposedly or reportedly 130 countries have come to us wanting to negotiate trade deals individually, and most of them wanting to do more of a free trade deal where they drop all the tariffs on the stuff that we're sending over if we'll do the same on them. I think we are going to keep the 10% across the board on most all of them. But some countries of note there that make a lot of stuff that are coming to us wanting to do freer trade is Taiwan, Israel, Argentina, Japan, Vietnam. I've heard Korea in there. And you think, well, what do they make? Well, if you look at the free caps you get from the sale barn and from the co-op and from your seed companies and stuff, they make a lot of caps. I know that. But anyway, I think we're going to get over that. It's going to be interesting to see how the China deal works out. I mean, we're going to choke them off. Eventually, they'll have to come to the table and want to do some negotiating with us, but we've got a negotiator in chief that knows the art of the deal. He wrote the book, knows how to do it, and like we're seeing, we think this whole thing that he brought about, that he campaigned upon and everything, is just so we can have freer trade, and we lose so much of the trade losses that we see all the time. You know, we're always on the short end of the stick and losing so much money in our trade. So I'm perfectly comfortable with him doing that negotiating for me. And I think our country is going to be a whole lot better for it. And it doesn't look like everybody says always wish-washing on this. Hey, he's getting free trade without any leverage. If he hadn't brought this up, how would you have got any of that leverage? He knows exactly what he's doing, guys. We have to quit speculating on what's going to happen and just wait and see what happens. And I think it's all going to come out in the wash, and we're going to be better off for it. Our futures market wasn't too bad off, not nearly as bad as it looked there middle of the week last week and at the end of the previous week, but we did lose money on our cash fat cattle this past week, and we knew we were vulnerable for that, and we knew there would be some kind of shakeup that didn't really have anything to do with supply and demand, because the supply and demand is all on the bull side. But we knew that it was going to take a little bit off, and it sure has. We've got to stop the bleeding on that and get it turned back around. Cash feeder cattle, yes, they were lower, but late in the week last week, I saw quotes higher than I've seen any time before. So we're still posting all-time record prices in certain areas and in certain markets and on certain classes of cattle. So, you know, still not too bad, guys. Let's look at your board for last week. April live cattle futures Monday started off horribly, down 370. Tuesday was up 17 cents. Wednesday was back up 370. Thursday down $1.95, and then Friday back up 162, with April live cattle futures ending the week just 15 cents lower, and everybody was, you know, screaming and hollering. 202.47 was your end of the week quote there on April live cattle. June live cattle lost $1.40 for the week, sitting at 196.80. April feeder cattle started the week off on Monday down 160. Of course, it has to tie up has to settle with your cash feeder cattle index here before too long, so it couldn't get too far down. But Tuesday was up 260, Wednesday up 332, Thursday down 97, and then Friday up 240. So April feeder cattle ended the week at 285.17, which was $5.75 higher. May ended the week 383 higher at 278.70. So, you know, how can we go on about how, you know, it just ruined all of our publicly traded markets? It didn't. May corn futures ended the week at 490 1/4. That was up 30 cents. Beans ended the week at 1042 3/4. That was up 65 3/4 cents. And that's probably the ag commodity that China buys more of than anything that we produce is beans. Ended the week up 65 3/4 cents. Kansas City hard red winter wheat for May ended the week at 568, up 10.5 cents a bushel. Fat cattle trade up through Thursday, and it was real spotty trade. We saw some early trade that was lower early in the week, and then that kind of set the market, and then by middle of the week we'd seen a few little deals that had added up to enough that I had told you mid to late week last week that I didn't think that the market would get much higher, and it didn't. Once you start trading cattle, and that's what I want to stress to people that are selling these cattle on a direct basis to these packers. The market's not lower until you start taking less money for your cattle than the previous week. We had people start doing that early in the week when they don't need to. They just got scared. And so late in the week, we did see some of the highest prices that we saw all week late in the week, but it didn't get much better, guys. But your live fat steers and heifers on a direct basis in your 5-area feeding region, negotiated sold from 204 to 209. That was $3 to $6 lower. Your weighted average on live steers in the 5 area was 207.80 up through Thursday afternoon. That was down 334 compared to the end of last week or the previous week. Dress sales 325 to 330. That was $10 to $15 lower. And dress steers up through Thursday afternoon had a weighted average of 327.88. That was $8.59 lower on the weighted average than the previous week's weighted average at the end of the week. So yeah, it was lower. As a whole, your Southern Plains, Texas, and Kansas sold $4 lower at 204 for the most part. Northern Plains sold $2 to $3 lower from 208 to 210 for the most part, and dress sales $10 to $13 lower from 325 to 328. On Friday, we did see some trade. This is on top of what I've already given you. Friday, they sold 1,550 head in Iowa, about 14,000 for the week. These are all very, very light volumes, and they may have traded more after 2 o'clock on Friday. Of course, I'll give that to you on our next visit, but unclear how much trade there was late Friday. But live sales in Iowa on Friday before 2 o'clock were 208 to 210. Dress sales from 325 to 328. Nebraska sold 1,050 head on Friday early. 19,250 for the week. The only sales we saw on Friday were 208 and 328. Kansas only sold 100 head on Friday. They'd sold only about 1,400 for the week, and that is very, very light for them. But the only price we saw in Kansas on Friday was 204. Texas sold 400 on Friday. That made up 1,400 for the week, which is nothing, and 204 was the only price we saw in Texas. Box beef cutout values were lower last week, not a lot, but the weighted average on choice steers or choice boxes last week all together had a weighted average of 336.79. That was down 205 from the previous week's weighted average on choice. And at the end of the week on Friday afternoon, your choice cuts were down another about $2.50 from that at 334.22. Selects weighted average on all of last week's trades 318.18. That was down $1.01, and your late Friday sales were almost $5 lower than that at just under 314. So it was lower on your beef. Your choice select spread on your weighted average from last week was $18.61, and all that based on 605 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter for last week was disappointing. 564,000 estimated cattle slaughter for the whole week last week. That was 27,000 less than the previous week and 34,000 less than the same week a year ago. Let's talk about your feeder cattle markets, brought to you by Specialty Risk Insurance. They are working to protect your livelihood, guys. Your real-time index, based on an 800-pound cash auction steer up through your middle 12 states, ended the week at 286.03. That was down 381 for the week. Your latest CME cash feeder cattle index ended the week at 286.13. Cash feeder cattle trends 5 to 10 lower for sure, as much as $20 lower in some sales on the classes that were the highest the previous week, which would have been your two-way cattle weighing in the 6s and 7s that had a turnout condition and were just blowing the roof off the place, but $20 wasn't much on cattle when you see them priced as high as they were into all-time record territories. But Mankato livestock and Mankato, Kansas had a pretty good sale on Friday. It was higher throughout than it was the previous week, and had a pretty good test the week before. They were your NationalBeefWire stick-out sale of the day. Look at this automated market report through Cattle Market Central and look at your best tested weights. 211 head of 4-weight steer calves in Mankato, Kansas, average 457 at 425.88. 294 head of the 5-weight steers, average 547 at 376.09. 174 head 6-weight steers, average 632 at 325.80. 588 head of the 8-weight feeder steers, Mankato, Kansas, averaged 851 pounds with a weighted average price of $291.11. Look at some of the heifers, and they were lighter. People are keeping heifers back, especially with this market slipping, guys. 140 head of the 4-weight heifer calves averaged 470 at 370.24. 164 head of the 5-weight heifers averaged 535 at 330.09. And 102 head of the 8-weight heifers averaged 865 at 258.75. I was at a replacement sale in El Campo, Texas on Saturday, active bidding on DVAuction there, and they had a lot of nice bred cows and pairs, about 50 bulls there that they sold, everything under high demand there. And I saw some of those F1 Brayford first calf heifer pairs in there bring $5,000 through the ring there, and I thought that was pretty good. And then a lot of other classes right behind them, guys. So you know, they're buying them everywhere. People weren't worried too much about tariffs during that deal. You sometimes say, well, you never give us any markets out of any Texas sale barns. Well, fact is, a lot of your Texas sale barns are just mom and pop one at a time type deals. But sometimes we do get some quotes out of the Texas sale barns, and I love to give them to you when I get them. I'm going to tell you about a quote from a sale barn that I've been to over the years, and it's always known it's been there because it's been there for 71 years in the Myers family. Muleshoe Livestock Auction in Muleshoe, Texas, boys. They have a good sheep and goat market there all the time. And at times when the cattle are coming off the wheat, they'll have some strings of cattle in there. They had some this weekend. 64 steers weighed 907 through the ring there, bring 270 at Muleshoe, Texas there. I thought that was pretty impressive. How about down in Central Texas at Dublin Livestock Auction there at DVAuction broadcaster, and Tanner Monk's a good friend of ours there. He sold 3 loads of fancy steers. They weighed 781 in Dublin, Texas on Friday, bring 290.70. Only kicker on that was the delivered price. He's got the trucks. He's got them headed north where them cattle were going. 290.70 on 781-pound steers on the average for those 3 loads, delivered price. And that's just using your head, guys. How about Santa Teresa Livestock Auction down in Santa Teresa, New Mexico? Our buddy Tato Medina there, he's selling cattle right along, and you know, we've got all these issues with trade and everything. On Friday, he sold 55 steers, weighed 542, and bring 348. That's more than a lot of you want to give. There was going to be tariffs included there, but not on top of that price. That's the price that they bring through the ring after they were already over here. And guy backed his truck up there, loaded those cattle up, and took them to graze out wheat or grass or whatever he wanted to do with them. How about Burke Livestock Auction in Burke, South Dakota? The Higgins steers, 132 of them, weighed 919 and bring 286. Thought that was pretty good. But the most impressive quote that I saw late last week or over the weekend in your Macrocin, no BS, top quote for the day, come from our buddy Justin Tupper at St. Ange Livestock, St. Ange, South Dakota. 109 steer calves weighed 489, nearly 500 pounds, and bring 458.50. Figure those up. That's your feeder flash for Monday.